Hello and welcome back. So, Slay the Spire 2 is a fantastic game already. I think the developers have done an excellent job in so many aspects of it. But we're still in early access and there's a lot of cards being changed, so I figured I'd put my 2 cents in there as a game designer myself as to what changes I would love to see next. And honestly, if the developers make any of these changes, I would be so happy. So let's jump into it. The card that started the idea for this video was actually Loop. Anyone who's played Slay the Spire 1 knows this card was awesome in Slay the Spire 1, but in that game, all focus was permanent, so triggering at the start or end of your turn doesn't really matter. The thing that bothers me is now there's so many cards that give you temporary focus, which I think is a great idea, but Loop sort of feels like a relic of the past now because it doesn't interact meaningfully with any of these cards. So what I'd love to see is just some way to change Loop so that it interacts with temporary focus. What I would love to see is turn it into a skill that just triggers the passive on each of your orbs. There's nothing like this besides Shatter, which evokes them, but Loop, if you have a bunch of Frost, this can be block, this can do damage with lightning. I think it would just create so many interesting builds. It'll be a really fun card. So that's what I would like to see, but anything that just lets Loop work with temporary focus is a change that I would love to see for the Defect. Next is Eidolon. It's a card that I think is actually fairly interesting, but the Necrobinder already has like the best survivability out of any character, so the payoff is quite strange on the character that can block better than anyone, and the enabling is also quite weird, like exhaust your hand feels sort of like an Ironclad type thing. So if I were to rework this, I think Doppelganger from Slay the Spire 1 actually fits the Necrobinder perfectly, so just turn it into an X cost that next turn, draw X cards and gain X energy exhaust. I think it would fit this character really well. So I would love to see that change. And then the upgrade would be draw X+1, gain X+1 energy, just like it was in Slay the Spire 1. Next is Right Hand Hand. This is a card that bothers me for a while because it's such a cool card. Like, Asti needs some of these like enablers that come back. The thing that bugs me is there are very few cards that cost 2 or more energy in the like Asti attacks kit. So you'd be like, really you're only playing this card if you're merging 2 archetypes, and it's just kind of weird. Like, I get what they're trying to do, you want a card that comes back, but like the only card that really cares about it is Flatten, but you can't even go right hand hand, flatten, get back right hand hand because this costs 0, and going flatten into right hand hand just feels weird. So the change I would love to see is just turn it basically into an Asti bolus. So Asti does some amount of damage, and then you get it back next turn. That way, you just are always going to have right hand hand available every turn. So taking this is sort of like, okay, I've got my Asti attack payoff set up, and then if you can, put Rattle, Sick, and Flatten in your deck, it just synergizes quite a bit better. I don't really care what this damage value is. It could do 1 damage. I think I would still be happy with it because the main thing is this is just an Asti attack that you're always going to have access to. Pull from Below is a card I like the idea of it. I think the general vibe is good, but the thing that's weird to me is that it's a multi-hit attack. This is deal 5 damage for each ethereal card played this combat. The Necrobinder has no strength scaling whatsoever, and she actually has 2 fairly common strength descaling cards like Friendship and Shared Fate. So if you take Friendship, instead of doing 5 per ethereal, this immediately drops to 3. So that's like almost a 50% decrease in Pull from Below damage. So this is a card that's already fairly fringe. But, like, Friendship is one of the best energy enablers, and this cares about how many ethereal cards you can play. So you would want to have more energy to be able to play more ethereal cards, to be able to, like, get value off your Pull from Below, but you can't really play these in the same deck because this makes this do 0 damage. So I would love to see this just change to the templating where it's 1 big hit instead of multiple smaller hits. I think that's a small change that would make this card so much more playable. One added benefit of this, right now Pull from Below does nothing on its own. Changing it to this, it would actually do 5 damage at the base rate. So it's a slight little buff to the card as well. But the main thing is just that you could play Friendship and Pull from Below in the same deck without just completely destroying your damage. I'd love to see that change. And then kind of on the flip side, the Regent actually does have a lot of things like Vigor that care about multi-hit attacks. So right now, Crescent Spear is 1 big hit. And I think it would be cool to turn this into multiple smaller hits. That way you can get value off of like Patter into Crescent Spear, Terraforming into Crescent Spear, and things like that. There's a lot of ways to do it. I would love to see it cost 0 because the cost is kind of clunky right now too, but you know, there's a lot of ways to do it. This, I just made it cheaper so it's more smaller hits, so then you can have some benefit for vigor, but there's also a lot of strength gain on the character. So I would like to see this change for basically the opposite reason that pull from below I would like to see as one big single hit. Grave Blast, this is a very minor one, but again, you're dropping your strength on the character. This deal 4 damage might as well just not be text on the card. If it became an Osti attack, it at least has some utility. So something besides deal 4 damage would be nice. Just making an Osti attack seems like the cleanest change, although it wouldn't really work with the art. But then you could play it and get some synergy with like Rattle, Sick'em. Like Grave Blast getting back Rattle becomes actually a pretty strong line because this is an Osti attack that boosts Rattle damage. You can Grave Blast into Flatten. Suddenly it's a little bit better. I think it would just be a little bit of minor synergy that would help the card feel better. Dominate and Cruelty. I think Dominate's... There's two issues I have with Dominate. Number one, I think it's too strong on its own, especially compared to like Inflame. Like there's similar cards and this one just does more. But the other thing that bugs me is this turns vulnerable into something that mostly cares about multi-hit attacks because you're always looking for Dominate if you're in a vulnerable build. And like this doesn't synergize with Bully, which is kind of the other uncommon because Bully's one big hit. So this basically turns vulnerable builds into like Sword Boomerang or Conflagrate, things that hit many times. Cruelty is kind of the opposite. Cruelty just kind of makes vulnerable better in general. And I think something that makes vulnerable better in general is something I'd like to see at uncommon because then it opens up a variety of builds, right? If I'm going invulnerable and I have like a bludgeon or perfected strike, I would like to be able to use Cruelty to make my bludgeon do a lot more damage. Whereas if you're taking Dominate, Dominate doesn't really work that well with bludgeon because one strength doesn't matter when you're doing 42 base damage. So I think Cruelty at uncommon would be a really cool place. It would open up what you can do in a vulnerable build, and then move Dominate to rare. It's an awesome card. I think it's perfect as it is. Maybe you could buff it if you make it rare, but I think it would still feel really good at rare. Also, look, Cruelty at uncommon, it like fits so well. The art, I mean. Because we have Lethality at uncommon, and that's such a fun card, right? Cruelty would be in a similar spot at uncommon over there on the Ironclad. So I think that's a change that would be really fun. Another one, pretty minor, but just make Iron Wave a strike, parrying strike. That way it grows Perfected Strike, it has other synergies. It just kind of fits this. I know Iron Wave came from the old game, which didn't care about strike as much, but we could make it a new card and just rename it or something. I think it's like a minor tweak that would help the card feel a lot more playable. Because at least it's like a card you're fine taking early, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So just naming it strike would help it go somewhere into like a strikes build. Forgotten Ritual is another card that made sense, I think, when the game first came out, but it's kind of in this weird spot where they just added exhaust and it was only enabling infinites, and they've just changed Drum of Battle to give energy in the exhaust theme as well. We also have Bloodletting at common, Expectify at uncommon, so there's so many ways to generate energy on the character, and this is the worst out of all of them. I'd like to see that just reworked into something completely different. If I had my way, I would just make this say cards containing strike gain replay 1 next turn, in conjunction with making this a strike. I think this would enable a very interesting build. Maybe it's too strong, but you know, you can make it cost 2 or give it exhaust. Like, there's ways to balance it, but I think this would be such a fun effect to have on Ironclad to make Perfected Strike. And those kind of things work on higher Ascension. And they're already fun on low Ascension. This would just make new players have even more fun on the character, I think. Demon Form is actually a card. I don't think it really needs a rework, but if you've been on the subreddit in the last like 2 months, people are trying to rework Demon Form all the time. If I was to rework the card, I would just make it say whenever you play a card, gain 1 strength, and then probably upgrade to cost 2, so you can gain strength the same turn. Functionally, this is kind of the same, but the upside is much higher. The thing I like about this version specifically is it encourages you to be proactive in getting the strength bonus, whereas this Demon Form, you kind of play it and then just wait. And that doesn't feel like the Ironclad. This feels like more like what the Necrobinder would want, like survive, survive, survive. Where this on the Ironclad makes you play a bunch of cards to get strength, and you kind of get this really fun exponential scaling. I don't know. I think this would be a really cool change. But if they don't change this one, I think this card's totally playable as it is. Anyway, that's just a few cards that I have thoughts on right now. If you like this type of video, like more game design aspects of Slay the Spire, let me know and I'll keep making more. And if you liked it, please consider subscribing. I'll see you next time.